Welcome back to another Broken Podcast. I'm Nick Taylor. You ever have a moment where you sit back and realize I've been in this situation before? It's not exactly the same one. The who, what, when, where, and why are all different, but somehow it's the same feeling. It's that quiet moment when the deja vu hits and you realize that you've been living this same emotional loop for years. Different faces, same story. Different choices, same results. That's what we're talking about today. Breaking cycles. In order for us to change, we have to understand that we've been conditioned not to. After spending so long surviving, we started confusing survival with our own identity. So, today I want to dig into what cycles actually are, why we keep repeating them even when they're destroying us, how to identify the patterns in your own life, and how to finally break them. I've been going through a lot of this in my own life recently. That's a big reason why I have not been as consistent here recently. I have been confronting my own cycles that I have been caught in various facets of my own life. I'm in a season of change, I feel like, and although it's one of the most difficult things that I have faced on my own healing journey, it is also one of the most rewarding ones. When people hear breaking cycles, they usually think of the big stuff: generational trauma, family dysfunction, addiction. And yes, those are cycles, but cycles run deeper than just those few examples. They're the repetition of pain that has become so familiar that we never even stop to question it. Psychologically, a cycle is a repetitive pattern of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that get reinforced over time. According to trauma specialists, our brains are literally wired to repeat what is familiar because familiarity feels safe, even when it isn't. That's why people who grew up in chaos often find comfort in chaos later on in life as well. It's not that they want drama, it's that peace feels so foreign, it is almost unnatural to them. The brain learns what safety is through repetition. When we experience something often enough, even something toxic, the brain starts labeling those experiences as normal. And when we try to step outside of that normalcy, it feels wrong. So we end up running back to what we know, even at our own detriment. That's how emotional cycles are born. Sometimes they start with childhood trauma, whether it was neglect, emotional inconsistency, or even over control. Other times it's societal and generational conditioning, like being told to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, don't cry, or you just have to deal with it. Over time, those lessons turn into emotional blueprints. We internalize them as rules for survival. We don't say, I'm in a cycle. We say, it is what it is. Or worse, that's just how I am. But cycles aren't part of your identity, they're learned. And anything learned can be unlearned. If you zoom out far enough, you'll see that cycles show up all around you. That friend who keeps ending up in the same kind of relationship, the one where they give everything and lose themselves. That family member who keeps quitting jobs when things get too stable because chaos is more comfortable than calm. The spouse who self sabotages every good opportunity because deep down they don't believe that they deserve it. Each of those is a cycle, and they all share one thing in common: their foundation is in emotional memory. Neuroscience refers to this as emotional conditioning. When you've been wired to associate love with pain, attention with chaos, or success with fear, your brain learns to chase those familiar sensations with no conscious effort. Even when you really want something different, something better, you'll find yourself back into the same cycle because at least you know what you're dealing with. It's like your body is running on autopilot on a course you never intended to set. And when you add generational trauma into the mix, the past ends up playing into the course of your future. Families don't just hand down genetics, they hand down coping mechanisms. Anger, avoidance, silence, emotional neglect, all of it becomes inherited behavior. That stems from generational trauma, and it's very real. Studies from the National Institute for the Study of Trauma and Resilience show that unresolved trauma changes how stress hormones and emotional responses are passed down to the next generation. So you can grow up fighting demons that were never really yours to begin with. That's why breaking cycles isn't just about changing your life, it's about changing your lineage. It's about saying, this ends with me. Here's the crazy thing about cycles: most of the time, we don't even realize that we're in one. We think we're making new choices. We begin to think we've moved on. But if the emotion driving your choices hasn't changed, then the outcome won't either. Let's be real, breaking a cycle sounds great until you actually try to do it. Because it's not just about changing behavior, it isn't only putting action behind your words. It's about going to war with your own nervous system. Your brain's main job is not to make you happy. For it, that is not even near the priority list. It's to keep you alive. And alive doesn't even mean safe. Sometimes it just means familiar. The body literally learns to regulate itself around whatever environment it had to survive in. If the environment was unstable, unpredictable, or unsafe, your brain wires itself to expect that, and it becomes normal to you. So when things are finally calm in your life, you don't feel peace, you feel panic. You feel as if something's wrong, things are too quiet. And that's how people get addicted to chaos without even realizing it. It's not about chasing drama. Sometimes it's about chasing stimulation because pain, anger, and conflict, they all light up the same dopamine circuits as excitement. This creates an emotional addiction, a way your nervous system can crave emotional intensity the same as an addict craves a fix. When you're stuck in a loop, you may inadvertently find yourself seeking out situations that hurt you. Not because you want to be in pain, but because you just want to feel alive. And then there's learned helplessness, a term first coined by Dr. Martin Seligman back in the 1960s. It's what happens when you've been through enough failure or pain that your brain stops believing effort even matters. You start telling yourself, what's the point? It always ends the same anyway. That mindset keeps you paralyzed, replaying the same story because you've lost faith in your ability to write a new one. At some point, the cycle becomes who we think we are. We say things like, I just have bad luck. I attract the wrong people. I'm just like my parents. But really, those are just deflections, ways our mind protects us from the discomfort of growth. The truth, you are not your patterns. You only learned them to survive. And the minute you start questioning them, you can start breaking them. All right, so we've unpacked why we stay stuck. Let's talk about how to see it within our own lives. Because you can't fix what you don't face. Identifying your cycles starts with noticing repetition. If you keep ending up in the same kind of heartbreak, the same arguments, the same emotional burnout, it is not by coincidence. It's a loop within that cycle. Start by asking yourself a few hard questions. What situations keep making me feel small angry, or unworthy? Who or what keeps triggering the same reaction in me? What part of me benefits from staying the same? That last one hits because sometimes even our pain gives us a sense of control. If you grew up walking on eggshells, maybe you became a people pleaser to feel safe. If you were ignored, maybe you learned to overgive to earn attention. Those patterns once protected you, but they are suffocating to you now and hindering your growth. According to Dr. Nicole Lapira, cycles live in the subconscious. About 95% of our daily thoughts and behaviors are automatic, driven by past conditioning. That means that most of us are living a story on repeat. So the goal isn't to hate yourself for doing that, it's to wake up to it. It takes actions, not words, to change it. Start journaling the patterns in your life. Notice the language you use when you talk about yourself. Notice the language that you use when you talk about your relationships. Notice when you're triggered, and instead of reacting, get curious about the root cause. Ask, what does this feeling remind me of? Because the moment you link your present pain to a past wound, you take its power away. Another big sign of a cycle is emotional deja vu. You meet someone new, but somehow it feels like you've known their energy before. Or you walk into a situation and your gut tightens before anything even happens. That's not just intuition. That's your nervous system recognizing a pattern it's lived through before in real time. And here's the twist: your body will always try to finish old stories. If you never got closure from a past hurt, your brain will keep being drawn to situations that feel the same, hoping this time it ends differently. But until you heal the wound itself, every chapter reads the same over and over again. So if you want to spot your cycles, look for repetition in your emotions, not your circumstances. Different job, same stress. Different partner, same arguments. Different year, same exhaustion. It's not life punishing you, it's life trying to teach you. And until you learn the lesson, it'll keep sending the same test. I am not the same man that I used to be, not even in the slightest at this point. I spent years silently wallowing in my own pain and trying to drown it. By not dealing with any of the real issues, the negativity just spread like cancer to other areas of my life. I was empty, and I lived in the mindset of, it is what it is. I became distant from those close to me and confided in relationships that were shallow just to feel valued. I hated who I had become, but I wasn't even present to fight it. I had shut down my emotions, built walls, and just followed the cycles on autopilot, never moving forward, never progressing, and just sitting safely in the normalcy of my pain, not even paying any attention to how it affected the people I said that I loved. The more I gave in, the more I became what I hated until nothing of me was left. I believed that I was my patterns, that being miserable was all that I deserved. I checked out. Why would I want to be present for any of it if misery was all life had to offer? I couldn't have been more wrong. But while I was in the midst of my worst, I could never see outside of those emotions and feelings. Not only because I didn't know how to process them and handle them correctly, but because emotional pain was so normal to me that if I wasn't feeling it, something had to be off. And although I have worked through so much, I am still fighting to end cycles and having to choose daily not to fall back into them. So, How do you break cycles that have been shaping your entire life? How do you stop reliving a pattern that's older than your own awareness? You start by doing something that sounds simple, but will be the hardest thing that you've ever done. You stop running from yourself because that's where every cycle begins, in avoidance, avoiding pain, avoiding truth, avoiding the part of you that's still bleeding, still trying to be heard. Breaking a cycle starts with awareness, but it doesn't end there. You have to follow that awareness into action. Here's the process, it's the same one used in trauma recovery and cognitive behavioral therapy. First thing, awareness. Notice the pattern, name it. You can't change what you refuse to see. Secondly, understanding. Ask yourself, what need is this pattern trying to meet? Maybe this cycle is about control. Maybe it's about love. Maybe it's about safety. There's always a reason, and until you understand it, you'll keep repeating it. Third, accountability. This is the toughest one because it means owning your role in keeping that pattern alive. It's not about blame, it's about reclaiming power. When you say, I keep ending up here, you're also saying, I have the power to choose differently. Fourth, it takes action. This is where you start to build a new pattern consciously. And yeah, it's uncomfortable as hell because breaking a cycle means choosing what's unfamiliar, and your brain will fight that with everything it's got. But discomfort doesn't mean danger, it means growth. Start small. If your cycle is self sabotage, start keeping the promises you make to yourself, even the tiny ones. If your cycle is toxic relationships, start setting one boundary and actually holding it. If your cycle is avoidance, start sitting with one emotion for 5 minutes longer than you usually would. That's how we retrain our minds. That's neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through new repeated experiences. And it's not just motivational talk, this is neuroscience. Studies from Harvard and Stanford have shown that new neural pathways form when you consistently choose a different response to an old trigger. So every time you choose peace over chaos, patience over reactivity, or honesty over people pleasing, you're literally rewiring your brain toward your own freedom. And that's the thing about breaking cycles. You don't do it once, you do it daily. It's not a grand gesture, it's 1,000 tiny decisions. It's saying no when your old self would have said yes just to feel accepted. It's not responding when your ego wants revenge. It's staying when things get uncomfortable instead of running. Every time you do that, you're teaching your nervous system a new normal. One that doesn't depend on chaos to feel alive. One that doesn't need pain to prove love. And that's where healing starts. I've had to sit with a lot of this here recently. I've approached facing another layer of cycles I haven't yet faced in my own life. All of these are deeper than surface level. I'm further along in my journey than that. It's like peeling back layers. Once you've created new norms that end one set of cycles, you face new, deeper ones that you hadn't been able to before. The further down in those layers, the harder and harder the cycles are to face and break, at least for me. I'm proud of who I am today. In fact, I love who I am. Something I would have told you was a lost cause at even pursuing just a couple of years ago. As lonely as it does become to heal at times, the peace in it is worth every bit of effort. Breaking cycles isn't about becoming a brand new person. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you survival was the only way to live. You're not broken for repeating patterns. You were just doing your best with what you knew. But now you know better. And that means that you have to choose better. And yeah, breaking cycles is lonely sometimes because you'll outgrow people, places, and versions of yourself that used to feel like home. But that's the price of evolution. And it's worth it. Because every time you say, this ends with me, you're not just changing your life, you're changing your children's, your relationships, your future. You're saying, the pain stops here, the silence stops here, the running stops here. You're rewriting the story your bloodline couldn't finish. And I think that's one of the most powerful things a person can do. So if you're listening to this and you feel like you're stuck, remember, you're not trapped. You're being taught. And once you learn the lesson, the cycle will be broken. But that's a choice you have to make every single day. You can't heal in the same patterns that hurt you. At some point, you have to stop surviving and start choosing differently. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Another Broken Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone that you think may need to hear it. I will be honest with you guys. This has been what I have been going through over the past month. I've been very deep in my own healing, and the funny thing about breakthroughs in mental health, you never know when you're going to face them. Something I've always tried to make sure is clear about this podcast, this is coming from a guy who is still in the trenches and is still healing himself. Dealing with where I am currently has affected my ability to remain consistent and show up here, and I have had to learn to be okay with that in the moment because I needed that time to myself to continue working on me. I want you to know this though. I am passionate about what we are doing here. And as long as I am emotionally, physically, and mentally able to, I am going to be here. I may have to step back every now and again for my own mental health, but this is a community that I am so proud to be a part of and will proudly continue to show up for. As always, I would love to hear from you, whether it's shooting us an email at brokenmedia1984@gmail.com or by following the podcast on social media. I have a few things in the works to be announced in the near future, so make sure you keep yourself posted. For now, I'm Nick Taylor. Have a good one, guys.